The Seattle Kraken have signed the first player in franchise history. We also have signings for teams like the Sharks, Habs, and Hawks, and we have some injury updates as well. We'll jump into the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some news to talk about today, mostly some signings and injury updates. First, on the injury front. Now, by the time this makes to YouTube, it might be, some of tonight's action might be already be underway, but Nathan MacKinnon is going to be out again tonight, so he continues to nurse the injury, and hopefully he'll be ready to go for the playoffs. Of course, that would be a massive blow to the Avalanche if they were going to be without their best player, but certainly these games here down the stretch will be very important to their seeding position in the very tough Honda West division between Vegas, Colorado, Minnesota. There's obviously the top three teams. There's quite a gap there after that, going down to the Blues, who'll be the final and fourth playoff team in the division. Of course, they'd all love to be in first place and probably play St. Louis, I would think, rather than be the two teams that end up playing each other out of the three. Minnesota's certainly been a surprise, and obviously the Avalanche are going to want a full arsenal of players available to them. So hopefully MacKinnon's back. And we also got word today that the Calgary Flames are shutting down center iceman Sean Monahan for the rest of the season. Now, of course, the Flames are one of the few teams, along with a team like Vancouver, who actually have a fair bit of hockey left to play. They still have 4 games left due to the COVID shutdown of the Vancouver Canucks that really had a major impact on the Flames schedule, because the Canucks were scheduled to play Calgary numerous times during that first week to 10 days. They were supposed to have a series where most of those games were going to be played. So obviously those two teams are not going to be in the playoffs. That's already been confirmed. So they're not playing for anything except positional in the standings, which will also obviously impact where they draft in the 2021 draft, or where their odds are going to be for the draft lottery more so. So obviously, Monahan, there's no point in him playing if he's battling an injury. Apparently, he's been dealing with a hip issue for about the last 20 games, according to head coach Daryl Sutter. Sutter gave him a lot of credit for trying his best to play through it, but now that they're officially eliminated, it just doesn't make sense for him to continue on and obviously deal with that kind of pain. Now, I know there's some people obviously cutting him some slack over his not so great season due to the hip issue, and I will also be one of those people. I will cut him some slack, but I honestly don't think we can say that his lack of production and his down season is really all about that. Clearly, the other first half of the season wasn't great for him either before the hip issue started up, and he's been declining for a couple of seasons now. So we'll see if Monahan is still back with the Flames or if he ends up getting dealt this offseason. The injury could possibly deter some potential trade partners. As we know, the Flames are expected to do a bit of a shakeup here, and one or two of their top guys could find themselves moved, including Monahan. So we'll see. But either way, regardless of where he ends up or what his future holds, he is expected to remain ready to go in training camp for the 2021-22 NHL season. Now, before we jump into today's signings, I just want to take a quick second here and acknowledge our channel sponsor. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscape. Of course, with Manscape, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. All right, so thanks very much for listening through our sponsorship ad. I greatly appreciate it. Manscaped's been a huge part of the channel here over the past 5 or 6 weeks, and I certainly appreciate their support. Now, as I mentioned, the Seattle Kraken have signed the very first player in franchise history. It's actually somebody that Ron Francis would have been somewhat familiar with through his time at the Carolina Hurricanes. They've signed Luke Henman, who's 21 years old, who was drafted but not signed by the Canes. But he was drafted by the Canes in 2018, which came just shortly after Francis departed the organizations. Of course, that's around the time that Tom Dundon bought the team, and one of his first items on his list was to dismiss Francis. But of course, that only happened at the end of April as the regular season came to a close, and then the sale was completed. So therefore, he was heavily involved with a lot of the draft prep and dealing with a lot of the scouts. So even though he didn't personally draft this player, somebody he would have been familiar with from that time for sure. Of course, Henman never ended up signing with the Canes, finished out his junior career in the QMJHL for the Armada, and certainly had a decent career, and now he's looking to make the jump to the NHL. So hopefully he actually becomes part of the team and actually ends up playing for them in some kind of a decent, if not prominent role. Hopefully he just becomes more than a trivia question here down the road. Now, here's another quick trivia question, and I really hope you don't use Google because I don't want you to, but for those watching, who was the very first player signed by the Vegas Golden Knights, our last expansion team to come into the NHL? Can you tell me who that player was? Down in the comments. The San Jose Sharks have announced a pair of signings here today as well. They have signed Alexander Barabanov to a one-year extension. Of course, they picked up Barabanov near the trade deadline from the Maple Leafs, who had brought him over from the KHL this year in a one-year deal. Really had a very limited role during his time in Toronto. And as the Leafs were incredibly busy at the deadline, he basically became a victim of a numbers game and salary cap issue, so he was traded out to the Sharks, and he actually ended up fitting pretty well there. In the games he's played, I believe he's been right around a point per game player or close to it. I haven't had a chance to see him play a whole lot myself due to obviously being in the West and just the way the schedule's working this year, but he's fit nicely, and obviously they're very interested in keeping him around. So they signed him to a one-year, $1 million contract. He gets $900K as a salary and a $100,000 signing bonus. So that could turn out to be a really decent find here for the Sharks. Of course, the Sharks were brokering deals, kind of weaponizing their cap space here a bit, taking on salary cap, for other players to kind of, and one of them was a deal obviously with the Leafs, in which Barabanov was kind of a throw-in. So obviously that works out for them, and they find themselves a guy who can produce some offense, given a much bigger opportunity. Now they've also signed young prospect Santeri Hataka, who's a Finnish-born left-shot defenseman who was a 6th-round pick in the 2019 NHL draft, so he gets his entry-level contract here officially on the books. The Montreal Canadiens have also had a signing announced here today. They've announced that they've signed prospect Rafael Harvey Pinard. He gets a 2-year entry-level contract due to his age being of 22 years of age. He was a really late pick in the 2019 draft, taken in the 7th round, number 201st overall. Now, he is a smaller player. I think he's around 5'9", 173 pounds. So certainly a smaller players. He had a chance to play in the American Hockey League this year and actually did pretty well. I mean, he also had a couple of 30-goal seasons in the Q, which, is certainly good production. Sometimes, though, it's not always going to translate. The QMJHL is a fairly high-scoring junior league, so sometimes it can be a little bit tough deciphering who's going to end up being the top scorers at the NHL level. During his first pro season playing with Laval, he actually put up some pretty good stats, registering 19 points in 32 games. So we'll see how things go for him. Certainly another French-born player to join the Habs organization, but obviously smaller in stature, which they do have a fair bit of guys already like that. So we'll see what his future holds with Montreal. The Chicago Blackhawks here have also announced that they've signed Henrik Borgstrom to a 2-year contract extension. Now, of course, Borgstrom is a guy who they picked up from the Florida Panthers. He was originally a fairly high pick a number of years ago in the Panthers organization. Came from the University of Denver, where he had a couple of really solid seasons after coming over from Europe. It looked like he was a really solid NHL prospect. Played in parts of 3 years with the Florida Panthers organization. In year 2, I think he got around 50 games, put up like 18 points. I thought things were progressing in the right direction, and then the next year things just didn't really start to work out. Seemed to be losing his place in the depth chart and just kind of falling out of favor there. This past year, he obviously spent the whole year over playing in Europe. Never made the jump to come over. Just didn't make sense based on where he was at with the organization. Knew he likely wasn't going to get much of an opportunity or a spot. Made more sense to play in Europe than to play in the American Hockey League, but obviously Chicago views him as an interesting prospect, according to Stan Bowman, and I do think as well he could still blossom into being a regular NHL player here. Like, he had a lot of promise, a lot of talent when he was drafted, just a matter of realizing that with the right opportunity. So he gets a 2-year contract at $1 million per season on the AAV. So that's a pretty solid deal for the Hawks. Really, basically, after picking him up from the Florida Panthers after doing a deadline deal here and kind of using their cap space as well. So a couple of teams like Chicago and San Jose found themselves some players just by kind of renting out some cap space, which was certainly good use by their management teams. That's all your news here for today. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news from all 32 NHL teams. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.